Well, with more, we're now joined in Calgary by Laurie Williams, professor of political science at Mount Royal University, and in Edmonton, political columnist Graham Thompson. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, listen, Laurie, I'm going to get you to start us out here because I think it's fair to say that people expected Premier Smith would have to focus on getting British Columbia on side with a pipeline to the Pacific coast. But, based on what happened this weekend, it looks like she also has to convince members of her own party about the merits of this game plan. Where is this opposition coming from?
Well, it's a deeply fractious party. I mean, remember, this is a united Conservative Party that isn't very united. The Wild Rose folks and the Progressive Conservative folks are the ones that were parts of those two parties. Have very different views. There's bad blood in some cases between folks that belong to those different parties, and they have sort of ideas for the future that are at the very least in tension, if not actually opposed to one another. Add to that the fact that a number of the folks that showed up this weekend were organized to try to get separatism on the agenda. They were unsuccessful at that, but they did get cheers. They did get support, particularly on Friday night. And we sort of heard them balanced a bit more on Saturday. They were trying to take over the UCP board, and actually they managed to get more of the Smith loyalists than the separatist folks onto that board. But all of these tensions and strategies and sort of pushes for power are roiling within the United Conservative Party, making it very difficult to govern.
Okay, roiling, as you say. Graham, I'll get you in on this because what is striking to me is the contrast that seems to exist here. Because on the one hand, you have Angus Reid reporting that the vast majority of Albertans support a pipeline to the West Coast, but the naysayers within the UCP itself was so vocal at this convention this weekend. What does this say about the control Alberta hardliners or separatists? And I appreciate what Laurie said, that they really want to exert their control, but what actual hold do they have on the party right now?
Well, it's a major hold. It's a real problem going back to Jason Kenney. Kenney wooed these people, the more fringe elements, and they helped turf him out. They turned on him, and then they helped make Danielle Smith leader of their party, and of course became premier. And she's been kowtowing to them ever since. And a lot of socially conservative things she's brought in when it comes to pronoun use in schools, the Bill of Rights to give protection to the willfully unvaccinated in public institutions like hospitals. She's being playing to them for several years now and doing it again this weekend because, look, the UCP does not represent a cross-section of Albertans, and especially at the convention. People who turn up at the convention do not represent, I would say, even the cross-section of Conservatives in Alberta. As Laurie pointed out, the United Conservative Party is a mixture of the old PCs, Progressive Conservatives, and the Wild Rose. So the people at the convention, a lot of them are just plain out separatists. I talked to them. And so they're angry at the deal. They say it's basically the pipeline deal with the federal government, with the Prime Minister, is not really a good deal. Alberta's giving up too much. And also just the idea of working with the Prime Minister, a Liberal Prime Minister, makes them really angry because they want to separate. So you have a lot of things going on here, but the people themselves that booed her on Friday are really booing when she talks about, hey, maybe things are working out now with Canada. And that's what set off the booing on Friday. And again, she got booed on Saturday, a mixed booing and some applause. But again, that's when she was saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be throwing in the towel on Canada when things are beginning to work. And she got booed for that. So people here in the convention, I was there, really the separatists are the ones that and are the dog wagging the tail some days when it comes to these party members. And Smith has been kowtowing to them, placating them for some time, and they hold enormous power over the UCP and therefore over the government as well.
Okay, so Laurie, who does Premier Smith have to convince that Alberta can work with Ottawa and British Columbia on this pipeline? Is it to members of her party? Is it to the general population to get them on side so people in her party do not, get enthused to kick her out?
No, there are two different constituencies, basically. I think she's got probably most of Alberta on her side. You see that Mark Carney got 2 standing ovations on Thursday. The day before, Danielle Smith got booed for the same deal. It's pretty clear that at least the oil and gas community is on side with this. I think environmentalists would have liked a little bit more in the way of protections and guarantees, but maybe recognize, at least some of them recognize the political and economic realities of the moment. And so they are wanting very different things than this very powerful bunch of folks, very well organized bunch of folks within the United Conservative Party. And the more she placates and kowtows to that further fringe element, and there are different demands within that fringe element. Some want separatism, some want socially conservative policies, some want more liberty and protection for freedom, which may not be particularly well defined. And the more she kowtows to them, the more she risks losing the support of moderate conservatives or moderate Albertans in general. Because for them, some of these policies are offside. We're seeing a lot of folks that are really angry about the management of the teachers' strike. We've got 14 recall petitions, most of which won't really have a shot at succeeding. A couple of them might, but the thresholds are so high they may not. We're hearing about MLAs getting inundated with people that are angry about the use of the notwithstanding clause. It's very difficult to try to manage the anger on both sides, and add to all of this the fact that some of those MLAs, they're sort of passing on the anger through caucus, but they're also in a situation where their bylaws allow for a certain number of constituency associations to force a leadership review, which is what happened to Jason Kenney. And Danielle Smith is very worried about that fringe sort of getting organized enough to push her out like they did Jason Kenney. So what wins today might lose the next election.
Mm-hmm. Which, leads me to another question here as to who is at greater risk here, at greater jeopardy, Graham. Is it the Premier when it comes to longevity, or is it the UCP itself? Because there seemed to be quite, to Laurie's point, division that was being expressed over the weekend.
Yeah, this is an issue for us. It's sort of Damocles hanging over her head, because Laurie is right. The thing is, and also historically, go back to even before the UCP, Conservative Party, the old PC party in Alberta, has a real tendency, a talent for getting rid of premiers who became unpopular with the public. And so, and of course, Kenney was forced out by his own members. And so this is still a threat hanging over her head. It doesn't necessarily even take a leadership review. It can happen behind the scenes. So right now, though, I talked to a number of people at the convention, and they're saying, look, we don't always trust Smith 100%, but she's the best that we've got. There's nobody waiting in the wings. So they do appreciate her, of course, constantly fighting with Ottawa. But Laurie is right. Most people in Alberta, right now, especially the business community, really likes the idea of this pipeline. And so I think even though you get separatists who are saying it's not good, Smith is going to try and convince them. One issue we're not really talking about here is that strings attached to this pipeline. It's not as if we're going to get this built tomorrow. First of all, there's no private company saying we'll build it, but also it's contingent upon something called the Pathways Alliance. And this is a plan by oil companies and the oil sands to build a giant carbon capture and sequestration project to take emissions from the oil sands and dump them underground. That's going to cost $16.5 billion. And they're looking for government help. So the federal government's saying, yeah, okay, fine, the pipeline, we'll help you with that if you get the Pathways Alliance carbon capture program underway. That's going to cost a lot of money. So there's a lot of things going on right now, which is why you've got members of our own party and others very skeptical about whether this is actually going to go ahead. So you do have various members in the UCP, those who were applauding her on Saturday, saying she's doing all she can, and the skeptics within the party saying, we think that she's being played by Carney. Mm-hmm. So the UCP, in the past, quickly, the Conservative Party tends to survive. It's the leaders who tended to get tossed overboard.
Okay, listen, I've got less than 2 minutes here, so very quickly from each of you. Laurie, I'll get you to start us off. Obviously there's a political strategy that has to be carried out by Danielle Smith internally or within the province itself. Is there a role for the federal government in this? Because I think for people in Ottawa, they worry about the national unity implications that this debate is raising.
Yeah, there absolutely is a role for Ottawa in this, especially in dealing with British Columbia and First Nations. That's something that clearly has to be done by leaders within Alberta, but it also has to come from federal leaders. And they haven't been as as forthcoming or consultative, or they haven't sort of laid the foundation for an agreement up until this point. And we're still hearing Premier Eby trying to suggest different ways this could work for British Columbia. And I don't know if negotiations are going on behind the scenes, but he's still speaking publicly. And it probably would work better if those things were handled behind closed doors. And we're also seeing from Quebec, well, this is what cooperative federalism looks like. And British Columbia wasn't even at the table for this. That is raising issues for unity as well.
Mm-hmm. Graham, what would you say to that in terms of a potential role here for Ottawa?
Yeah, I think that you look at what Smith, her language has changed more for the last few months, even few weeks, when she was talking. Listen, a third of Albertans wanting to separate, and real threat. But now on the weekend at a news conference with the media, she was saying, look, when it comes to separation, maybe 35 or 37% of Albertans, looking at separation. And she tended to downplay that number. So she's really trying to present herself as someone saying, hey, listen, Albertans, we've been complaining about Ottawa for some time. We have a real path here to actually help the country become more united, and that's dealing with this pipeline. So she's really, in a sense, moved from sort of gently pushing ahead the separatist sentiments, trying to backtrack on that and go in favor of, if we can just work together, BC and First Nations, we can actually build some more a pathway to a more united Canada. The problem she's having, even though I think Albertans would appreciate that, Graham, it's still the people in her party giving her a hard time over it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're watching, and I really appreciate the insight from both of you, as always. Laurie Williams, Graham Thompson. We'll speak again, but for this evening, thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure.